Everyone know that it's being recorded. And so welcome everyone this afternoon to our LOD support session. We'll be talking about using Excel to manage your registration data. And I'm going to hand it over to Debbie Lewis, who's taking the lead today. So thanks, Debbie.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to start with my video on, but I've had really bad internet connections this week, so I might end up having to turn it off. Just a warning. So I'm Debbie Lewis, as Jared said. I'm with the Learning and Organizational Development Unit. I'm Resource Planning Analyst, and earlier this week on Monday, I talked about using Qualtrics to collect registration information for program participants. And today we're going to follow that up with how to analyze or manage that data using Excel. I'm trying not to be distracted by Evan, but he's so cute. So which screen are we seeing?
Debbie, it looks like we're seeing your presenter view of your PowerPoint.
Hold, please.
Yep. If you click those three dots, I think you can hide presenter view unless you still want to have it shown.
How's that better?
Got it.
Okay, thank you. My problem is when I hover over the top, it hides stuff when I start to share. Okay, so again, we're talking about managing, using Excel to manage our registration data. So first off, I'm going to just give you a little highlight of what Excel is. We're going to do a little introduction to Excel and the environment in Excel. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can view our data, including freezing panes, the column width, adjusting column width and row height, formatting cells, deleting and hiding columns or rows. Then other ways to manage our data, including using the fill handle to copy things, sort and filter, find and replace. I'm going to show you how to do some conditional formatting, and also do things like text to columns if you get a bunch of information in one cell. And then I'm also going to introduce you to at least one formula or function. It's called Concatenate, where we can bring some stuff together in different cells. So here's a big picture for you. The environment of Excel. It is a worksheet program, so we can track data and manage data. A book this is called a workbook. The file is a workbook, and the default name for a book is a book 1. Then we also have down here, a workbook would consist of multiple worksheets. So you can see that down here in the brown ovals. And then the next, we have the ribbon across the top. That's where we're going to find all of the functions that we can do. And that's highlighted by the red rectangle. Then across the top, we also have each section has a tab. And on those tabs, we have separate groups. So for example, the home tab has a clipboard, it has font, it has alignment and number, etc. If you want to open up the box for any of these particular groups, you would just highlight this little drop-down arrow, drop into the right, and that will open up a separate window, and you can adjust the data using the features in that particular group. Next, we have across the top, all of our columns are lettered. And then down the side, on the left-hand side, excuse me, I have problems with my right and my left, we have what's called our rows, and those are numbered. So a single cell, for example, the C4, this is a single cell, and then the pink rectangles are highlighting cell ranges. Just so you know, as Jared said, we are recording this session, and it will be posted here on the Learning and Organizational Development website. And you can see the specific links on the COVID-19. We have added a tab on our website all the way over to the right-hand side that will show you all of the different resources that we've been curating so far. I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel. Actually, I'm probably going to start with Qualtrics so we can kind of pick up where we were from our last meeting. Okay, so we had created a registration survey, which you can see here an example of. What we're going to do first in Excel and Qualtrics is to click on this Data and Analysis tab. And then over here on the right-hand side, we're going to click on the Export and Import dropdown. Go ahead and click on the Export Data. I found this out the hard way. Go ahead and export your data with a CSV file instead of clicking on the Excel file. That way you can do manipulations a little more easily. I'm not sure what happens, but I tried with the Excel file earlier this week, and I found that I couldn't apply my formulas, etc., like I normally can do in Excel. So I've switched to the CSV, which is what I typically did anyway. So select CSV and click on download, and it's going to download for you. This is a little bit different. I'm hoping you can still see my screen. You probably cannot see the. Can you see the pop-up windows now?
Yeah, we can see the dialog boxes.
Thank you. So I have clicked to open this in my, my file browser. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to extract this data because it comes from Qualtrics in a zipped format. So click on the Extract All button, pick a place for it to go on your computer. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop because it's easier. And go ahead and click on Extract. Then you can navigate to where you had saved the file and open up that file in Excel. So here's my example of the file opened up with the data in it. So some of the things that I was going to talk to you about is how we can view this data a little more easily. You can see there's a whole lot of information here that we probably don't need that Qualtrics has inserted into our file. So some of the things that you can do include, we have a few of extra like header rows up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete this third row right here. So I do that by highlighting on the row number, and then I right click, and then I click on delete. And that will get rid of that row for us. The other thing I want to show you is you can freeze panes if you've got too much data. Then you can go ahead and freeze your panes. And what that means is it's going to freeze part of your data. So let's say I only want to see like starting right here in this first cell that has my question where I asked the first name. So if I click in that cell, I click on the View tab, click on Freeze Panes dropdown, And then if I click on the first option, it's going to freeze the panes right where I'm located. If I click, I can also opt to just freeze the top row, or I can freeze the first column. If I click here, it's going to freeze my panes. You see the lines that it inserted. And then when I use the scroll bar over here to scroll over to the right, you can see how that freezes that. If you don't want it to be frozen anymore, you just do the freeze panes again and then click on the unfreeze panes option. So that'll help you navigate with your data. For example, if you have a really long row of data and you want to make sure that you can always see the name, and then as you scroll over to the right, you can keep viewing the name. You can see I can go all the way over here to the right and still see the name associated with each of those responses. Some other ways that you can clean up your data so that it's a little easier to view. I've said that we have a lot of data over here on the left that's really unnecessary. So there's a couple different options that you can do here. You can highlight your columns. I did that clicking on the column letters, right click, and then say hide if you want to keep the data, but you don't want to view it. To undo that, I simply go the opposite direction, highlight to the left, right click again, and then I can select unhide, and there my data is back. So it hasn't been deleted, it's just been hidden. If you know you're never going to use this information, you can go ahead and delete it by doing the same thing, highlighting those columns, right click, and then select delete. Usually what I like to do before I start deleting any of my data, I prefer to make a copy of the sheet and save it as raw data. So in this case, then I would manipulate the resulting sheet. If I want to make a copy of this sheet and add it to another workbook, I can do that as well. So if I click down here on the name of this spreadsheet, which is webinar registration test for April, I right click, I can say move or copy. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a copy, and I'm going to put this in a different workbook. So if I come up here to this drop down, if I just left it where it is, it's going to copy it into this spreadsheet, this workbook that I have open right now. But I'm going to move it to a different workbook. So I'm going to move it to this other one that I've been kind of putting some examples into. So I just select the workbook that I wanted it to go into, and I click OK. And then if I come over here to this workbook, I can see that it's here. Okay. You can also select and move your sheets around. Like if you want to hide this sheet or move it so it's not listed first, you just click and drag and put it over here. And then I typically change this into, I can double click on the sheet name and change the sheet name. So I would call this like raw data, which I've already done here in the sheet next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that sheet because I already have an example here. So again, we can delete our row columns, our rows or our columns by clicking on either the letter or the number, depending on what you want to delete. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again in this file. So I'm going to just delete all these columns that I have over here. Make my data a little bit easier to see. So we have first name. If you click a cell, you can see this is what's in that cell is up here in this formula bar. It's typically just showing you what's in the cell. If I want to adjust all of my columns so that I can see the data fully, I can highlight all of my columns again. And then if you right click when your cursor looks like the line with the double arrow on it up in the right-hand side, if you double click there, it's gonna make all of the columns adjust to fit the data that's within that column. You can see that there. Now, personally, I don't really like to have my data this spread out on my sheet. So I'm probably gonna like rein it back in a little bit here. All right. So the next thing I wanted to show you is text to columns. Let's say if for some reason somebody sent you some additional names of additional people that wanted to register for the workshop, but they missed the registration date, and they just send that to you in like a Word document. You can copy and paste that into Excel. And then I was going to show you how to change this data into separate cells so that it's usable. So this is a function called text to columns. So if I highlight this column, I can do text to columns. But the first thing I want to do is look at the data that's in the cell. I can see that there's different ways that this data can be separated. So this person sent me a numbered list. So there's a number and a decimal point. Then there appears to be a space, then first name, last name, another space, and then email address. Okay, so I want to have this separated out into number, the name, first name and last name separated individually. And then I want to have my email address in a separate column as well. So that gives me a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 columns I'm going to need. So what I'm going to do is go over here to the right of this column F. And I'm going to insert some columns here. That gave me 2 columns. I'm going to do 2 more. Okay, so now I have 4 columns. So if I come back to my column that I want to do text to columns on, I highlight that column. I come up here on the data tab, and there is a feature for text to columns. Okay, and I'm going to say this is delimited. So there's characters that are separating the data that we want to put into separate columns. So I'm going to leave that as delimited. I'm going to click on next. I can get a preview of the data here. And for anything that's selected here, it will take away whatever that character is. So for example, I'm saying that there is a space separating some of this data. That means it takes away the spaces in between. If I click here and say, watch the decimal points here, where it says 1 period, 2 period. If I click on other and I put a period, it's going to separate it so that all of anywhere there's a period is going to separate out the data. So look at what that did to our email addresses. So it's got a period. My email address has a period here and a period in between OSU and EDU. So be careful of what character you're selecting that delimitates your data. If I just leave it on the space, it's going to separate this into 4 separate columns. I'm going to go ahead and say finish. So this tells me that I didn't have enough columns available. So I'm just going to throw a few extra columns in there and do it again, because I don't want to overwrite any of my data. So I'm clicking on the text to columns delimited, and I'm going to click on the space. We'll see what happens here. Okay, so that didn't erase any of our data. So you can see here that it has separated all of that data that was in a single column out into separate columns. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hide those. for a minute. Okay. So that's how you can separate out data that maybe you didn't have in separate columns into separate cells on your spreadsheet. Here's another way we can view our data. These numbers are kind of hard to read. There's supposed to be a phone number that we've asked participants to give us. And it does make it a little bit hard to read when it's just a 10-digit number. So to make this more readable, you can click on the column, and I'm going to show you how to format cells for special characters. So in this instance, I'm going to right click on this column. I'm going to say format cells. And there are several different options here. I'm going to go ahead and select special because I know this is supposed to be a phone number. And what that's going to do is going to make it look like a phone number, and it makes it a little bit easier for our eyes to read. So you can see how it entered the parentheses around the area code, and then it put a space, and then it put a hyphen in between the first and the second part of that phone number. Another thing that you can do to help manage your data and the way the data is viewed is to apply a filter. So if I want to come up here and I want to know only the people that are have registered and want to attend the session 1 or the session 2, I can apply a filter. So if I click on my second row, or in this case, when you're trying to apply a filter, just click on the row that's immediately above your first row of data. If I click on that row and I go back to the Home tab, and I click on the Sort and Filter menu, I can do a filter option. So what this does, you'll see it adds a little drop down right next to all of the column headers. If I click on that drop down, it gives me the option to view certain things that are in that column. So if I select all, and I say, I only want to see the people that are registered for session 1. I can click there, highlight session 1, and then it's going to filter my data and show me that these people are the ones that are registered for session 1. And if I highlight this information and I look down here, right in the bottom of the file, you can see it says count is 14. So it's doing a count for me of any cell that has some data in it. If I want to see everybody again, I just click on that little filter again, and you can see that the drop-down arrow has turned from a drop-down arrow into a little funnel. That means our data is being filtered in this column. So if I click on that again, I can just select all, and that shows me how I can view everything again. Another nice thing about having the filter applied is you can do things like sort your data just by using these little filter drop-downs. So say, for example, I'm trying to set up a registration, like if I'm doing an in-person program and I'm trying to have a sign-in sheet, and I want that sign-in sheet to be alphabetical by last name. All I need to do is click on this little filter right above my last name column. If I click on that drop down, I can say sort A to Z, and then it's going to sort all of my data. And you notice that all the data stayed together. Okay, that's probably one of the safest ways that you can sort your data. Sometimes people will click and they'll highlight, oops, I'm going to do that. Sometimes people will click and just highlight a bit of their data, and then they'll go and do the sort up here using that same menu item again. And then what happens is it only sorts that part of the data. It doesn't sort everything. So make sure that when you're sorting your data, you're very careful and you don't missort your data, because we wouldn't want Annie Alvarez's email address to show up as somebody else's, okay? Another thing that you should probably keep in mind when you're viewing your data is when we have a generalized registration form out there and we're not using individualized emails to send to people to ask them to register for a session, you might get some duplicate values in your email addresses. So I've sorted this by last name, and you can see quickly that Sarah Castro has signed up twice. The other way to do that, when you have lots of rows of data and you want to see if there's duplicate values in there, you can highlight a column header, and this is something called conditional formatting. So on the conditional formatting tab up here, I'm going to do a highlight cells rule, and then I'm going to highlight my duplicate values. And it's just going to come up with a, hey, do you want to highlight these with red and red fill? So sure, whatever you tell me. That's a quick way. So now I can look at this column of data and see that there are 2 email addresses that are duplicate. So if you bear with me for a second, I want to show you a registration that I did send out this morning for a program that Amanda DeRide did last night. I've kind of hidden the emails here so you can't see them completely. Anyway, you can see that there is a lot of duplicate emails. So I've gone from a list of 295 people. You can see down here. So some people registered twice, some people registered 3 or 4 times. And it was a general link, so they probably didn't realize they registered and they just registered more than once. So once I got rid of the rows that had duplicate data, I ended up with 261 emails to send the EET to. This was a EET example. So that highlighting your duplicate data is really helpful. There's also a way that you can eliminate duplicate data using Excel, but if it's not a whole lot of duplication, then I tend to do it by hand so I can go into the data and look at it and make sure that they, you know, if they have multiple rows, if they've registered more than once, I can look at the rows of data. I typically take the last one shown. So that's one good reason to keep around the information of the completed date. If nothing else, the information that you get out of Qualtrics, probably the completed date column would be the most helpful one, because then if you have duplicates, you can come in and look at the last one that they used and submitted. But for this one, I know it's a true duplicate. Everything on this row is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the second row here. And now I don't have any duplicates in this column. There's other things that you can do with conditional formatting. Including, we can highlight additionally, we can highlight a little bit more who's coming to this session 1 and session 2. So if I want to highlight the session 2 in one color and session 1 in a different color, and the I am unable to attend in a third color, I would just come over here, highlight the column, use conditional formatting again, and we're going to do the highlight cells rule again. But this time I'm going to come down here and do the more rules, because I want to do a text that contains, or I could just click on this text that contains. So it's going to tell me, it's going to grab the first cell that's up there, but I want it to grab this session 2. And then I want it to highlight this, since I'm already using that red fill with red to indicate duplications, I'm probably going to select a different color. So let's just say yellow. And I'm going to say OK here. And then I'm going to do that again so I can get a different color in there. So if I do conditional formatting, I highlighted the session 1, April 21st. So this one I'm going to do with a green. I'm going to say okay. And then I'm going to do a third one, just because we like colors. So text that contains. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this cell that says I am unable to attend. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that as red. That way it'll call attention to it later for me. So now I've set up this column so that I can easily glance and see that there are, you know, session 2, there are in yellow, session 1's in green, and the I'm unable to attend is in red. And you can use these as well. I'm getting an internet connection is unstable message. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, the last thing I wanted to show you was the concatenate. Oh, wait, I forgot to show you how to copy down a row. So if I wanted to, for example, copy down this session 2, down the rest of this row, you can see my cursor changes when I highlight over different parts of a cell. If I want to move this, when it's a black 4 arrow like cross, I can click on there and then move it. See how that just moved it? The other nice thing about Excel is there is that undo button. And if you don't remember the button, you can do Control-Z and it will undo your last move. And if I want to copy something, if I come over to the bottom right-hand corner, I can, when it's a solid cross and doesn't have the little arrows on the end of the cross, it will copy down. All right, and then I was going to show you how to concatenate something, which just means you're bringing together cells. All right, so the first thing you want to do is go to where you want to concatenate. I'm going to go ahead and unhide these columns that I hid earlier. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and insert, let's say 2 columns. And there's a reason for this. I like to do the 2-column method. The first column, I'm going to type in the formula. So concatenate formula, again, just brings things together that you want to have together. So if I want to have my first name and my last name in the same cell, then I can join those 2 together. And the formula is, when you're using formulas, you always start with an equal sign. And then in Excel, you can just start typing. So concatenate starts with a CON, and then you can just double click on that formula. And I want to bring together first name and last name, and I want it to be in this one single cell. So I'm going to go ahead and click on A3 because that's my first name. You can also type in A3, you don't have to click on it. I'm going to put a comma so I can separate it from the next thing. I want there to be a space in between my first name and my last name. So I'm going to go ahead and any text that you want to enter, you would put in quotes. So in quotes, I'm going to put a space. So I'm clicking on the space bar once, and then I'm going to close my quotes. I'm going to put another comma so I can select the next element that I want to be in this cell. So I want the last name to be next. And then I'm going to close my parentheses. So when you use the double click method of double clicking on the cell name or the formula name, excuse me, it automatically opens your parentheses. So the elements of a formula, you need to have that equal sign, you need to have the name of the formula or the function. then you can put a parentheses, open your parentheses, and then you're going to put the data in there, what you need to, in this case, we're going to bring together these pieces of data, and then you need to close your parentheses to finish the formula. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key. Now I want this to be copied all the way down this row. I don't want Annie Alvarez to be copied all the way down this row, but when I come over here and do this, pull down the row, copy down the column like I showed you a minute ago, and just pull this formula down, it's going to give me what I wanted. So we can now see that this has Carolyn King because we've brought together those two pieces of data that were in the separate columns. Then, but you can see up here that it's still the formula. So I like to kind of play it safe, and I just copy the column again, and I'm using Control C, but you can also use your right click, or you can come up here and do copy. And then I do my other keyboard shortcut for paste is Control V as in Victor. And then you can see here, I'm glad I did this. So instead of using keyboard shortcut, in this case, what I usually do is I right click, because you can see how it's done an Annie Alvarez, because it's bringing together these two, because I didn't right click, and just do paste values. So I don't want it to copy that formula again. I just wanted to paste the values, okay? So that's how I got it to do the right thing. And then that way you can take this into, a Word doc if you wanted to. I just saw a question, can you concatenate rows as well? I believe I have tried that before and it did not work. So can you give me an example? Or Brian, have you done that before? Or T?
I've not done that, other than taking the rows, turning them into columns, and then doing it.
Yeah.
But that's cheating.
Well, it's not really cheating.
No, it's just a workaround. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of doing the rows, but a step in the middle. No, I mean, I organize my data pretty much the same way that you have it here, so I've never had a need to do it by rows.
Yeah. Okay, let's see, were there any other, so what Brian was just saying though, when he said he was cheating, is something you can do with copy and paste, is called transpose. So if I wanted my columns to become rows, I can just copy this data, for example. If I do a Control C, I'm going to go ahead and open up another workbook because it's going to look funny. If I right click in here in this first cell and I do paste special, or you can click right here and it would be a transpose, you can see the column header is now over here in column A, what used to be the column header. And then all of our rows of data are now in their own columns. So how's that for confusing, right? But that is one way if you have kind of like flipped the way you collected your data, and you really should have had your columns as your rows and vice versa, then that is one way to adjust your data so that you can flip it so your columns become your rows. And that again was a copy and then a paste special. And it's called transpose, and it's just this little thing that looks like it looks like an L, a backwards L. Okay. I believe that was the last type of formula that I was going to show you, or sort and filter was the other thing that I'm going to show you. No, find and replace. So if I wanted to see, find people, if I was looking for a particular person, I just come up here again, I'm on that home tab. I click on this editing group, click on find and select, So I can look for a particular person. I know that Mickey Mouse is in my database. So look there, I found Mickey. So that is one way you can also view your data or manage your data. Do we have other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want me to demonstrate something again, or if you have a question about something else that you're trying to do. Is there a difference between concatenate and merge? I like to use concatenate because it's an easy formula. So if I, for example, came down here and decided I wanted to do Sue Wong, you'll notice what happens. There's a difference here, okay? If I click on this alignment down here and I click on like merge cells, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna lose my column B. So the data in column B just disappeared because I've merged it with column A. Does that answer your question? So typically the concatenate formula is the best thing to do so that you don't have data loss. Did I see another question? Here's a long one. Hold on just a second. Let me open this up a little bit so I can see it. Yes, I'm looking up at the ceiling here because I've moved my monitor. I have used this when collecting for each counselors, Qualtrics survey. Yes. Great example, Kay. If you have addresses, how do you do a mail merge for labels? Now, Katie, we weren't really going to get into doing mail merge, but you could also do the same thing for example, if you want to do name badges, which right now we can't really do name tags because we're not doing in-person things. But I can, yes, that is possible to do addresses from your registration. If you've collected their address information, you can do merges into a Word document to do labels for mailing. And I will probably get into that in another session. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, that's a pretty specialized task a bit outside this presentation.
Yeah.
So, but definitely one, yeah, that should be covered at some point in the near future because it's super helpful.
Yes, and Amy Kay, thank you for offering the to get Katie a resource. So do we have other questions? I kind of went through that pretty quickly. All right, let's see. All right. If nobody else has any other questions, are there any other formulas or anything you want me to demonstrate? Brian is going to be doing another session tomorrow, and he'll be doing more of the bringing together your evaluation data. So he's going to, I believe, show you some simple formulas. Brian, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you're going to do tomorrow?
Yeah, sure thing. So it'll be just a few, like a handful of formulas that will help you to summarize mostly quantitative data. So really basic things like sums and adding up different cells to get to a score or something like that. We'll be doing some subtraction. So if you have a pre-test and a post-test, how do you take the post-test value and subtract the pre-test value? So for example, if you have a 5-point scale of disagree to agree or something like that, you want people to move from disagree on the pre-test to agree on the post-test. We're going to look at maybe how do you find out what percentage of your class improve their knowledge or improve their agreement or something like that. We work with counts a lot. So if you have a whole bunch of rows of data, how do you count things in it? How do you count the number of instances of a word or of a response? And then, yeah, so just making some basic tables using basic formulas that you can then copy and paste into Word, or to help you to kind of create a summary report or summary document for somebody. So yeah, kind of what happens after you export all of your survey data from Qualtrics, or if you put it directly into Excel, what do you do with it then?
Right.
So yeah, we'll start with a handful and we'll go from there.
LOD team, did I miss any other questions in the chat box? I don't think I did.
Yeah, I think you got to all of them.